The words came during dinner with his parents. Honestly, Mom, taking care of Natalie has become such a burden. I don't know how much longer I can do this. My husband Derek said it while cutting his steak, casual as discussing the weather. His mother Patricia nodded sympathetically. His father Vincent patted his shoulder. And Derek smiled at me across the table, that same charming smile that once made me feel loved. I smiled back. Not because I was hurt. Not because I was broken. But because 3 months ago, I'd opened a drawer in his office and found something that changed everything. While Derek thought he was cleverly planning his exit, I'd been quietly building my own. My name is Natalie Bradford. I'm 42 years old. And the man sitting across from me, laughing with his parents about how difficult his life had become, had absolutely no idea that his carefully constructed lie was about to collapse around him. I took another sip of wine and watched him bask in their sympathy. Let him enjoy this moment. Let him believe he'd finally found the courage to voice his truth. By tomorrow morning, everything would be different. His world would shift in ways he couldn't imagine. I wasn't always the burden Derek claimed I was. 10 years ago, I was a successful architect with my own small firm in Portland. I designed homes that won awards at regional competitions. I had clients who waited 6 months for my availability. My calendar stayed booked solid. Then I got sick. Not dramatically. Not suddenly. Just persistent headaches that became migraines. Fatigue that wouldn't lift no matter how much I slept. Doctors ran tests. More tests. Specialists brought in more specialists. Finally, after 18 months of searching, a diagnosis, a rare autoimmune condition that attacked my nervous system. Some days were good. Other days, I couldn't get out of bed without help. The unpredictability was the hardest part. I never knew which version of myself would wake up each morning. I had to close my firm. Derek, who worked in pharmaceutical sales, promised he'd take care of everything. We're a team, he'd said, holding my hand in the hospital room after my diagnosis. You'd do the same for me. I believed him completely. For the first 2 years, he seemed to mean it, but gradually, slowly, things shifted. His patience thinned. His resentment grew. His promises faded into memory. The comments started small. A sigh when I asked for help with something simple. A comment about how much easier his life used to be before all this. Then they became more pointed, more deliberate. At his company party last year, I overheard him tell a coworker, "Yeah, my wife doesn't work anymore. Health issues." The way he said it made it sound like an excuse. Like a burden he carried. Like I'd chosen this path instead of having it forced upon me. I started noticing other things too. He'd schedule dinners with friends on my bad days, leaving me alone in the house. He'd talk about his future plans, travel, adventure, freedom, using only I instead of we. Every sentence about the future excluded me. When I brought it up, he'd apologize quickly and say I was being too sensitive. That my medication made me paranoid and emotional. That I was reading too much into innocent comments. I started to believe him. Started questioning my own perceptions. Until 3 months ago, when I found the folder. It was tucked in his desk drawer under old tax returns. Inside were printouts. Legal documents. Notes in his precise handwriting. And a timeline. The folder was labeled Exit Strategy in Derek's neat block print. Inside were printouts from divorce lawyer consultations. Financial projections showing exactly how he'd divide our assets to his advantage. Detailed notes about my medical expenses and how they'd affected what he called his quality of life. But the worst part was a typed document, a statement he'd clearly drafted for potential court proceedings. It painted me as completely dependent. Helpless. Unable to contribute anything meaningful to the marriage. It exaggerated my bad days and completely erased my good ones. It made me sound like a burden he'd heroically carried for years out of duty and obligation. There were even highlighted sections about caregiver burnout and protecting his mental health and future. At the very bottom, a handwritten note in red ink, file after Mom's birthday dinner in June. She'll be sympathetic witness. Dad too. That dinner was 4 months away at the time. I had time to prepare. I photographed every single page with my phone, making sure each image was clear and readable. Then I carefully returned everything exactly as I'd found it, making sure nothing looked disturbed. I didn't cry when I found that folder. I didn't confront him that evening or the next day. Instead, I started planning my own exit strategy. First, I called my old friend Vanessa, who'd become a family lawyer after we'd graduated college together. I explained everything that had happened, everything I'd found. She reviewed the photos I'd sent her and went quiet for a long, uncomfortable moment. "Natalie, this is actually very good for you," she finally said, her voice careful and professional. "He's documenting his intent to abandon you during a serious illness. That's not going to look good to any judge in our state." She explained that in Oregon, assets acquired during marriage were typically split equally in divorce. But there were important exceptions, especially when one spouse had supported the other through significant medical hardship and then planned to leave. "Start documenting everything immediately," Vanessa advised firmly. "Your good days, your contributions to the household. Any work you do. Anything that contradicts his narrative that you're helpless." I began keeping a detailed daily journal. On good days, I photographed myself cooking dinner, cleaning the house, working on small freelance design projects I'd quietly taken on. I saved every email from clients thanking me for my excellent work. The freelance work had actually started 6 months earlier, during a particularly good stretch of health. A former client from my old firm reached out through email. Her daughter needed help designing a small cottage-style home on a budget. I said yes immediately, working slowly and carefully, on my own flexible schedule. It felt incredibly good to use my brain again. To create something beautiful. To feel valuable and skilled. To remember who I used to be. I didn't tell Derek about the project. By then, I'd learned not to share good news with him anymore. He'd either dismiss it as insignificant or find some way to make it about himself and his sacrifices. But I kept working quietly, small projects here and there. Consultations. Logo designs for small businesses. Nothing too physically demanding. I opened a separate bank account at a different bank for the income. Just in case. I didn't know then exactly what I'd need it for. But instinct, that quiet voice that had kept me safe before, told me to keep it private and protected. By the time I found Derek's exit strategy folder, I'd saved $8,000. Not a fortune. But enough to feel slightly less trapped. Enough to know I had real options beyond depending on his mercy. Derek's parents had always treated me kindly before my diagnosis. Patricia would call weekly to chat. Vincent sent birthday cards with personal notes inside. Afterward, though, things changed gradually. Patricia started making careful comments about how difficult this situation must be for Derek especially. Vincent would mention friends whose wives still worked full-time despite having challenges. They never said it directly to my face, but the message was perfectly clear. I wasn't trying hard enough to be normal. So when Derek announced we'd have dinner at their house last week, I knew exactly what was coming. This was his carefully chosen stage. His sympathetic audience. The witnesses' notes had specifically mentioned. I spent the entire afternoon preparing myself. I wore a nice dress that fit well. Did my makeup carefully. Made sure I looked healthy and capable and nothing like the helpless invalid Derek needed everyone to see. Let them think whatever they wanted. I had my own plan now, and it was far better than his. At dinner, I was perfectly polite. Pleasant and engaged. I asked Patricia detailed questions about her garden. Complimented Vincent's cooking skills. And when Derek made his announcement, calling me a burden with that practiced sad smile, I watched their faces very carefully. Patricia's expression showed pure maternal sympathy for her suffering son. Vincent's face showed uncomfortable but clear agreement. After Derek's carefully delivered comment, heavy silence settled over the dining table. I could have defended myself in that moment. Could have listed everything I still managed to do despite my unpredictable illness. Could have mentioned the design work, the household tasks, the tremendous effort I put into every single day. Could have told them about the clients who valued my work, about the income one earned, about the life I still had. Instead, I smiled calmly and said, "Derek's absolutely right. This has been very hard on him." Patricia looked visibly relieved. Vincent nodded approvingly, like I'd finally understood something important. Derek's expression flickered with brief surprise, then settled into deep satisfaction. He actually thought I was agreeing with his carefully constructed narrative, accepting my role as the burden in his heroic story. "I think," I continued slowly, "we should definitely talk about the future soon. Make some real decisions about our situation." Derek's smile widened noticeably. "Yeah, we definitely should do that." He thought I was giving up, accepting whatever future he'd already planned. His parents exchanged meaningful glances across the table. Patricia reached over and squeezed Derek's hand supportively. "You've been so incredibly patient, sweetie," she said warmly. I sipped my wine slowly and let them all believe exactly what they wanted. Tomorrow, everything would change dramatically. But tonight, I'd let Derek think he'd finally won. We drove home in complete silence. Derek seemed lighter, happier than he'd been in months. He hummed along cheerfully to songs on the radio. Tapped his fingers on the steering wheel in rhythm. He thought the hard part was finally over. That I'd accepted my place in his narrative. That his exit would be smooth and guilt-free and easy. When we got home, he poured himself an expensive whiskey and sat comfortably on the couch. "I'm really glad we're on the same page now, Nat," he said casually. "I honestly think this is what's best for both of us moving forward." I stood in the doorway and looked at him carefully. This man I'd once loved deeply. This man who'd promised to stand beside me through absolutely everything life brought. This man who'd turned my illness into his convenient escape plan. "Derek," I said quietly, my voice steady. "Did you really think I didn't know?" His confident smile faltered immediately. "Know what?" I pulled the folder from behind my back, the original one I'd taken from his office an hour before we'd left for dinner. I'd removed it while he was showering, knowing tonight would be the perfect moment. "About this," I said, dropping it on the coffee table between us. "About your exit strategy. About everything you've been planning." The color drained completely from Derek's face. "Where did you get that?" His voice was tight, suddenly defensive. "From your desk drawer. 3 months ago." I sat down across from him. "I've known about your entire plan since February, Derek." Derek stood up quickly, his expensive drink forgotten on the table. "You went through my private files? That's a violation. You wrote a legal statement calling me a helpless burden while secretly planning to divorce me. I think privacy stopped being a concern the moment you did that." He tried to recover, shifting tactics to anger. "You had absolutely no right to." "I had every right," I interrupted firmly. "I'm your wife. The person you promised to support in sickness and health. Remember that part of our vows?" Derek's jaw clenched visibly. "This is exactly why I need to leave. You're paranoid. Controlling. You make everything difficult." I actually laughed. "Derek, you literally wrote yourself a script. Exit strategy. Caregiver burnout documentation. Timing it perfectly after your mother's birthday so she'd feel sorry for you and support your decision." I opened the folder and pulled out his handwritten notes. "You even highlighted which parts would sound most sympathetic to a judge." Derek started pacing nervously across the living room. "You don't understand what it's been like for me, Natalie. Taking care of you day after day. Watching you be sick constantly, missing out on everything I wanted because of your condition and limitations." "I never once asked you to miss out on anything," I said firmly. "You chose that entirely on your own. And then you resented me for choices you made yourself. Because my whole life became completely about you." His voice rose sharply. "Every single plan, every decision we made, it all revolved around whether you were having a good day or a bad day. That's exactly what marriage is supposed to be," I said quietly. supporting each other through genuinely hard times. I had the illness. You had the resentment and anger. The difference is, I tried every day to get better. You just tried to get out. Derek stopped pacing abruptly. So what now? You going to blackmail me into staying in this marriage? No, I said calmly. I'm going to divorce you first, on my terms. I pulled out the thick envelope I'd prepared that afternoon with Vanessa and handed it to him. These are divorce papers. I'm filing them tomorrow morning at 9. You'll be officially served by noon. Derek stared at the envelope like it might physically explode in his hands. You can't be serious right now. Completely serious. He tore it open roughly, scanning the pages quickly. His face went from shocked to confused to absolutely angry. You're claiming I abandoned you? That I failed to provide adequate emotional support during your illness? Because you did exactly that, Derek. I paid for everything. Every single medical bill, every treatment, every specialist appointment. Money isn't support, I said. It's literally the minimum legal requirement of marriage. He kept reading frantically, his face getting redder with each page. You're asking for 70% of our marital assets? That's completely insane. Actually, Vanessa says I'll probably get it pretty easily. Judges really don't like spouses who bail during medical crises. Especially when there's clearly documented evidence of planning an exit strategy for months. Derek crumpled the papers tightly in his fist. This is just revenge. You're angry that I wanted out of this situation. No, I said calmly. I'm protecting myself financially and legally. There's a significant difference. His voice turned cold and threatening. You won't win this, Natalie. I'll fight this hard. My lawyer will absolutely destroy you in court. Your lawyer already knows about the case, I said evenly. Vanessa sent them a courtesy notice this afternoon around 3. Derek went completely still. What are you talking about? Professional courtesy between attorneys. She let them know I'm filing tomorrow morning and exactly why. She included copies of your entire exit strategy folder. The timeline. The witness planning. Everything you wrote. I watched understanding slowly dawn on his face, spreading like a stain. Any competent lawyer who sees that folder will know exactly what you were doing. They'll also know it looks absolutely terrible to any judge in our state. Derek's anger deflated suddenly into something else entirely. Panic. Real fear. Nat, wait. Let's just talk about this reasonably. We're completely done talking, Derek. I made some mistakes, okay? I got frustrated and overwhelmed. But we can definitely work through this together. You called me a burden to your parents tonight. You smiled while doing it. There's nothing left to work through. He sat down heavily on the couch. What exactly do you want from me? I want the divorce finalized. I want my fair share of everything we built. And I want you to fully understand that your plan failed completely. Derek's hand shook slightly as he set down the papers. This will absolutely ruin me, Natalie. You should have thought about that before you called me a burden, I said without sympathy. Derek looked up at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something like genuine respect in his eyes. Or maybe just fear. Hard to tell. How long have you been planning this exactly? He asked quietly. Since the day I found your folder in February. 3 months, he said, almost whispering. You've been pretending everything was normal for 3 entire months. I learned from the best, I said. He visibly flinched. Good. Derek, you made me feel completely worthless for years. You turned my illness into your personal tragedy. You documented everything that was wrong with me and absolutely nothing that was right. You were carefully building a case to abandon me with a totally clear conscience. I stepped closer to where he sat, but what you didn't count on was that I still had fight left in me. That I was still smart enough to see exactly what you were doing. That I wasn't actually the helpless burden you desperately needed me to be for your narrative. Derek opened his mouth, then closed it. For once in years, he had absolutely nothing to say. I picked up my purse from the side table. I'm staying at Vanessa's tonight. Don't contact me except through lawyers. That's not a request. Derek spent that night in the guest room after I changed my mind about leaving. I decided to stay, this was my house too. I slept better than I had in months, maybe years. In the morning, I dressed carefully, professional clothes, minimal but polished makeup. I looked capable. Strong. Put together. Nothing remotely like the helpless person Derek had described in his cruel documents. Vanessa met me at the courthouse at exactly 9. "Ready?" she asked, squeezing my hand. "Completely ready." We filed the papers officially. By noon, Derek would be served at his office. I spent the afternoon at a quiet coffee shop downtown, working peacefully on a design project. A real one with a real deadline. A former client had reached out last week, asking if I'd consider coming back part-time to consult on a commercial project. I'd said yes without hesitation. My phone buzzed repeatedly throughout the day, Derek calling, texting, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. I ignored every single one. Around 3 o'clock, Vanessa called with an update. He got the papers. His lawyer Mitchell called me immediately. They want to negotiate a settlement. What are they offering? I asked. Standard 50-50 split. No fault divorce. Quick and clean. No, I said firmly. Natalie, no, Vanessa. He doesn't get to walk away clean. Not after everything he did. The next 2 weeks were incredibly tense. Derek stayed with his parents across town. I remained in our house, technically still joint property, but Vanessa had gotten a temporary order legally keeping him out. He'd violated that order twice, showing up unannounced and demanding to talk. The second time, I called the police without hesitation. That incident went directly into our court file. His parents called constantly, leaving messages. Patricia left long, emotional voicemails about forgiveness and honoring marriage vows. Vincent sent formal emails about being reasonable and fair. I blocked them both after the 5th attempt. I wasn't interested in their opinions anymore. Slowly, details of the case began leaking to Derek's social circle. Not from me, I'd signed confidentiality agreements. But from court filings that were public record. Anyone could look them up. His friends started asking uncomfortable questions. People who'd sympathized with poor Derek and his sick wife were now seeing actual documents about his exit strategy. About his planned abandonment during illness. The narrative was shifting dramatically in ways he couldn't control. I ran into his colleague Austin at the grocery store one afternoon. "Hey, Natalie. I heard about everything that's happening. I just wanted to say I'm really sorry." I paused in the produce section. "Sorry for what specifically?" I asked. He shifted uncomfortably. "For believing Derek's version without question. He made it sound like you were, well, a burden?" I supplied. Austin winced visibly. "Yeah. But I've been hearing other things now. About what he was actually planning. That's really messed up." It was messed up, I agreed calmly. For what it's worth, some of us at work are pretty disappointed in him now. That's not how you treat someone you promised to love. After Austin left, I stood in the produce section for a long moment, holding vegetables I didn't remember picking up. This was what Derek hadn't anticipated at all. That people would actually judge him, that his carefully constructed victim narrative would crumble completely when exposed to reality. That his caregiver burnout would look a lot like cowardice when people saw the documented evidence. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Derek, "We need to talk face to face. Please, Nat." I deleted it immediately. We'd talk in court under oath. Nowhere else. That evening, I cooked a real dinner for myself. A proper meal with vegetables and protein. I lit candles on the table. Poured a glass of wine. Sat down alone and celebrated being by myself. My phone rang again, Derek's mother from yet another new number. I let it go to voicemail. I was done explaining myself to people who'd never actually listened. The house felt peaceful. Quiet. Mine. I pulled out my laptop and responded to 3 new client inquiries that had come in. My reputation was rebuilding itself slowly. People remembered my work from before. They were willing to give me another chance. And I was ready to take it. The preliminary hearing arrived on a Wednesday morning in late April. Derek sat across the courtroom with his attorney Mitchell, who had a reputation for being aggressive. Derek looked tired. Thinner. His suit hung differently on his frame. Good. Judge Anderson reviewed our filings carefully, taking her time. She was known for being fair but extremely tough. Vanessa had warned me she didn't tolerate games or lies. Mitchell argued for equal division of assets. Standard divorce proceedings. Nothing unusual about the situation. Then Vanessa stood and presented Derek's exit strategy folder. Every single page. Every note. Every calculation about how to leave me with minimal guilt or financial obligation. She projected some pages on the courtroom screen. Judge Anderson's expression didn't change, but she took her time reading each document. When she finally looked up, her gaze fixed directly on Derek. Mr. Bradford, did you personally create these documents? Derek's attorney started to answer, but the judge cut him off sharply. I asked Mr. Bradford directly. Derek cleared his throat nervously. Yes, Your Honor. You plan to divorce your wife specifically due to her medical condition? It was more complicated than that, yes or no, Mr. Bradford? A long pause. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Anderson set the documents down carefully on her desk. Mrs. Bradford, I'd like to hear your side of this situation. I stood slowly, my voice completely steady. Your Honor, I have a chronic autoimmune condition. Some days are genuinely bad. But many days are good and productive. I've continued to work as a freelance architect for the past 6 months. I manage our household on my good days. I contribute to our marriage in every way I possibly can. I gestured to Vanessa, who handed me a thick folder. These are testimonials from clients I've worked with over the past 6 months. These are photos documenting my daily activities. These are bank statements showing income I've earned independently. I placed everything before the judge carefully. My husband decided I was a burden and planned his exit. He didn't communicate with me. Didn't try marriage counseling. Didn't give me any chance to address his concerns. He simply decided I wasn't worth the effort anymore. Judge Anderson reviewed my evidence slowly, reading several testimonials completely. This is substantial work, Mrs. Bradford. Thank you, Your Honor. I'm not helpless or useless. I'm just dealing with a medical condition. There's a significant difference. The judge looked at Derek again. Mr. Bradford, why didn't you discuss these feelings with your wife directly? Derek hesitated, looking at Mitchell. Mitchell whispered something, but Derek shook his head. I thought it would be easier to just leave, he finally said. Easier for whom? For both of us. Did you ask Mrs. Bradford if she wanted an easier exit? Derek said nothing. Judge Anderson made extensive notes. I'm ordering full financial disclosure from both parties. Mr. Bradford, you'll continue to cover Mrs. Bradford's medical insurance through these proceedings. We'll reconvene in exactly 30 days. She looked directly at Derek. And Mr. Bradford? Document your contributions all you want. But understand that marriage is a legal partnership, especially during illness. The law protects spouses who are abandoned during medical crises. Remember that carefully. We left the courthouse through different exits. Derek tried to approach me in the parking lot anyway. Vanessa stepped between us immediately. No contact except through attorneys. You know the rules, Mr. Bradford. He backed away reluctantly. I got in my car and finally allowed myself to breathe deeply. That night, Patricia called from yet another unknown number. I answered without thinking, distracted by cooking. Natalie, we need to talk seriously about what you're doing to Derek. What I'm doing? I asked. This vindictive divorce, dragging his name through the mud publicly. He's suffering terribly. He called me a burden at your dinner table, Patricia. He smiled while doing it. Where was your concern for my suffering? Patricia's voice hardened noticeably. Derek has given you everything. He's been a saint through your illness. A saint who planned to abandon me and documented it in detail? Silence on the line. Then, you're twisting things around. I'm telling the truth. That's different. You'll regret this, Patricia said coldly. When you're alone with your illness and no one to help you, you'll regret pushing Derek away. I laughed without humor. Patricia, Derek was already gone. I'm just making it official. And honestly? I'd rather be completely alone than with someone who sees me as a burden. I hung up. Blocked the number. Poured myself tea. My phone buzzed again, a text from Vanessa. Mitchell called. They want to settle. Vanessa's text read, Derek wants to settle. 65 to 35 split in your favor, plus continued health insurance for 2 years. Thoughts? I called her immediately, my heart racing. That's very close to what we wanted. I know. But there's a condition. He wants you to sign an NDA about his exit strategy documents. No posting on social media, no discussing with his employer, no public statements. I was quiet for a long moment, thinking. He's scared. Terrified, Vanessa confirmed. His reputation is damaged. If this gets worse, it could affect his pharmaceutical sales career. That industry relies heavily on relationship building and trust. What do you honestly think I should do? Vanessa paused before answering. Honestly? Take the deal. You get almost everything you wanted financially. The NDA protects him, but it also protects you from ongoing harassment. You can move forward. She was right. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rebuilding my life. Okay, I said finally. But I want 3 years of health insurance, not 2. And I want the house completely. Done. I'll call Mitchell first thing tomorrow morning. The settlement took 2 more weeks to finalize completely. Derek agreed to everything without further argument. 65% of our marital assets. 3 full years of health insurance coverage, the house entirely in my name. I kept my separate accounts and my freelance business. He kept his retirement fund and his car. We'd split other investments down the middle fairly. On the day we signed the final papers, we met at Vanessa's downtown office. Derek looked smaller somehow. Defeated and worn down. We sat across from each other at a conference table, signing page after page in silence. When we finished, Mitchell and Vanessa left the room briefly to file the paperwork electronically. Derek and I sat in heavy, uncomfortable silence. Finally, he spoke quietly. I really did love you once, Natalie. I know you did, I said. But love isn't enough if there's no respect. No partnership. No willingness to fight through hard times together. I got scared, he admitted, looking down. Of what my life was becoming. Of being permanently tied to someone who was sick. Then you should have been honest from the start. We could have divorced with dignity and respect. Instead, you made me feel worthless while planning your escape. Derek nodded slowly. I'm sorry. For what it's worth now. It's worth something, I said, but not enough to change anything. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. I know, I said. He left. I sat alone in the conference room for 10 minutes, just breathing. Then I walked out into the afternoon sunlight, officially divorced and officially free. The relief was overwhelming. That evening, I called my parents, who'd been supportive throughout everything. My mother cried happy tears. My father said he was proud of me. I realized I hadn't heard that in years. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I sat in my home office, my house now, legally and completely, reviewing detailed blueprints for a new project. A young couple wanted to build their first home together. They'd specifically requested me after seeing my work featured in a local design magazine. The feature had come about unexpectedly. A journalist doing a story about local businesses had heard about my story, not the divorce details, which were sealed, but my return to architecture despite my chronic illness. She'd framed it as a comeback story. Quiet perseverance. Resilience. The article had brought new clients steadily. My business was growing at a manageable pace. I'd hired an assistant named Carmen to help on bad days. I'd joined a support group for people with chronic illnesses. I'd started dating again, nothing serious, just coffee and conversation. Remembering what it felt like to be seen as a whole, complete person. My health hadn't magically improved. I still had bad days when I couldn't leave bed. But I'd learned to work around them skillfully. To be gentle with myself. To understand that my value wasn't measured by productivity or perfection. Derek had moved to Seattle for a job opportunity. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was struggling professionally. His reputation had taken hits he couldn't easily repair. I felt neither satisfaction nor sympathy. Just distance. Last week, I received a message from an unknown account on a professional networking site. It was from a woman named Bridget. She'd seen my design magazine feature. But that wasn't why she was writing. "I'm dating your ex-husband," her message began. He told me about his previous marriage. About his wife's illness and how difficult it became, but then I found court documents online, public record, and I saw your name. I saw the settlement details. I saw enough to know there's another side to his story. She continued, "I don't know you, but I wanted to thank you for leaving a paper trail. For standing up for yourself. Derek has been wonderful to me. But sometimes I catch him making comments about how I'm not needy like his ex. Your court case helped me understand what that really means." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied carefully, "Trust your instincts. Document everything. And remember, you're not a burden, you're a person. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise." She thanked me profusely. I closed my laptop and looked around my office carefully. My home. My life. Built from the ashes of what Derek tried to destroy. He'd called me a burden at his parents' dinner table. I'd smiled back. Not because I accepted his definition. But because I knew something he didn't. I knew I was stronger than he ever gave me credit for. And that smile, that knowing, confident smile, was the beginning of everything. My freedom. My business. My future. Derek thought he was planning his exit, but really, he was planning my beginning. And for that, in a strange way, I'm grateful. Because the woman I became after leaving him is someone I'm genuinely proud to be. Burden? No. Survivor? Absolutely. And that makes all the difference. Today, I woke up on a good day. I made coffee. Opened my laptop to find 2 new client inquiries. Responded to both professionally. At noon, I met Carmen at the office we now share. We reviewed 3 active projects. Made plans for next month. She asked if I was okay, noticing I seemed emotional. I told her I was better than okay, because I finally understood something important. Derek didn't fail me. I didn't fail Derek. We simply revealed who we really were under pressure. He revealed someone who ran. I revealed someone who fought. And in the end, that knowledge, that clear, honest knowledge, set me free. The divorce wasn't my ending. It was my beginning. And every day since has been proof that I chose correctly. I chose myself. I chose my dignity. I chose my future. And I'd make that choice again every single time. The burden he complained about? It was never me. It was his own weakness he couldn't carry.